All right, we have a couple more friends joining us. We are ready to start math. To begin with, let's talk about the math word whole. A whole is when all the parts of an item or set of things come together. So here's an example of one whole, when all of the parts are together. Next, we have the word part. Here's an example of part. A part is a piece of the whole, one piece of the whole. A fraction means when part of a whole is represented by a numerator and denominator. Don't forget, those are important math words. Let's talk about what those words mean. The numerator is the top number in a fraction, and it tells how many pieces are being used. So when we have a unit fraction, the numerator is always 1 because it's talking about one of the parts. The denominator of a fraction is the bottom number. It tells how many pieces are in the whole. So for this example, 1/6, I know it's talking about a unit fraction because the numerator is 1. And I know that there are 6 equal parts because the denominator is 6. Fractions represent a number, and they are really helpful to us as mathematicians. All right, great review with vocabulary, boys and girls. In math today, you will click on Activities, Assign to Class folder, blue, Math, and our task today is called Fractions, Numerators Other than 1. Please open your task and we will practice together.
Miss Runaway.
Yes.
I get mine.
Say it again.
I already did mine, but I'll go over it still.
That'd be great. Thank you. I'm sure Mrs. Thaxton would appreciate that. You can just listen and check our work as we go. Awesome sauce. All right. Slide number 1 says, with your teacher, we are going to do some together and you're going to do some on your own today. On slide 1, I see some directions and a shape for us to partition to represent some fractions. First, we're going to read the directions. It says partition the shape into 1/2 pieces. Label each part as a unit fraction of the whole. Shade 2 halves of the shape using the highlighter. Identify the denominator, the name of the unit fraction, and how many unit fractions are shaded on the whole. Wow, that's a lot of information. I know that we're going to work together. I want students sitting up tall, focusing their attention, looking and listening. Whatever I do to mine, you do to yours. Let's go through the directions one at a time and practice on slide 1. First job says partition this shape into 1/2 pieces. I see some information. It tells me to shade it into half, to partition, into half. So I'm going to partition or cut my shape in half. I know I can partition like this, or I can partition up and down like this. And when I do up and down, it's harder for me to do it nice and straight. So I think I'm going to stick with left to right. Remember, you can use the shape tool if you want to partition. Sometimes it helps us make a nice straight line. We have now partitioned our shape into half pieces. I'm going to check off my direction. I did number 1. Partition your shape into equal areas and check off that you did the first step. Step 2 says label each part as a unit fraction of the whole. So on my model, I'm going to label the unit fraction. The text told me to partition into halves or 1/2. I know that unit fractions always have a numerator of 1. I'm going to go ahead and write my numerator. Then I know that the denominator tells me how many equal parts. I have 1, 2 equal parts. So I can label my denominator as 2. 1/2 is the unit fraction for this model. Check that yours matches mine. I have just labeled each part as a unit fraction, so we just did direction number 2. I'm going to check it off my list. I just did step 2. Step 3 is the new skill we're going to practice today. We know that when we put our unit fractions together, it makes one whole. Well, today we're going to practice shading these unit fractions by following some directions. Step number 3 asks me to shade 2 halves of the shape. So what it's asking me to do is have 1/2 plus another 1/2. When I put those together, it will equal 2 1/2. So I'm going to think of my 2 1/2 as 1/2 plus another 1/2. It asks me to shade using the highlighter. I'm going to pick my highlighter and I'm going to pick a color that I will see on the red, like maybe brown. Whoa, that did not work. And now I'm going to shade 1/2 I have now shaded 1/2 of my whole. The problem asks me to shade 2 halves. So now I need to shade the other side. I have now shaded 2 halves or 2 1/2. I can check off that I have done step number 3. Check that you have shaded 2 1/2 on your model. What we just did was shade 1/2 plus another 1/2. And when those come together, when we have 1/2 plus 1/2, it equals 2 halves, which is the same thing as one whole. We just shaded the whole model. So this is something you guys are going to start noticing. When all of our parts come together, it equals one whole. 2 halves is the same thing. It's equal to one whole. Let's look at these questions that are next to the problem. First, denominator. What is our denominator? I see the denominator is 2. I can fill it in to answer the question. Please record that your denominator is 2. Next, we're going to name the unit fraction. What's the unit fraction for this model? I know the unit fraction always has a numerator of 1, and my denominator is 2. So my unit fraction is called 1/2. And that's what we labeled on our equal parts. Check that you have your unit fraction shown. Our last question asks, how many unit fractions are shaded in the model? So I'm going to count the unit fractions that I shaded with the highlighter. I shaded 1/2 and a second 1/2. I shaded 2 unit fractions. We're going to quickly go over slide 2. You're checking to see that you have this done. Step 1 says partition the shape into 1/2 pieces. Done. Step 2, label each part as a unit fraction of the whole. This is 1/2. This is 1/2. I've now done step 2. Step 3 says shade 1/2 of the shape using the highlighter. Okay, I'm going to shade only 1/2 this time, not 2 1/2s. All right, I have now done step 3. Check your screen, make sure yours is matching mine. Next, I need to identify the denominator. I look at my unit fraction, I see my denominator is 2. Next, name the unit fraction. My unit fraction's name is 1/2. How many unit fractions are shaded? I shaded 1/1/2. I shaded 1 unit fraction. Check your work. Make sure yours looks like mine. Let's try another example together, this time moving faster. Go to slide 3. Here we have a circle model. It says, look at the partitions of the model.
Say something.
Use them to help you. So I'm going to use the partitions to help me. Okay, step 2. Label each part as a unit fraction of the whole. Okay, I know my unit fraction always has a numerator of 1, so I can go ahead and get that set up. Now I'm going to think about my denominator. I know my denominator tells me how many equal parts, so I'm going to count my parts. 1, 2, 3 equal parts. My denominator is 3. Check your example, make sure yours matches mine. I have now done step 1 and step 2. Step 3 asks me to shade 0/3 of the shape using the highlighter. So I'm going to get my highlight tool ready, and it asks me to shade 0/3. So wait a second, if my numerator is 0, that means I'm not going to shade any thirds. 0/3. Okay, I can tell Honesty thinks that's pretty silly. I guess I've done step number 3. We're not going to shade any thirds on this one. If my numerator is 0, I'm not counting any of the parts. So check, we did that. Awesome sauce. Let's go to step 4. I'm going to name the denominator, unit fraction, and answer a question. Okay, denominator. My denominator is 3. Denominator goes down on the bottom. Let's fill it in. Name of the unit fraction. I already labeled each equal part. I know it's called 1/3. And last, my question. How many unit fractions are shaded? Well, I remember we didn't shade any this time. It told me to shade 0, so I shaded 0 unit fractions on this example. Check that you have these answered just like I do. Starting on slide 4. Starting on slide 4 is your independent practice. You need to complete all of the slides. Don't forget to reflect on your goals. Today, did you partition shapes equally? And did you write the unit fraction? If you did, I want you to tell me if you were successful today or if you still need some practice with this skill. Your job is to start on slide 4 and complete all of the slides showing your knowledge of partitioning, labeling the unit, and answering the questions. That is your assigned task today. When you are done, you will push the green check to turn in.